Smart Health Talk with your host, Elaine McFadden.
Welcome, everyone. This is Smart Health Talk radio show, and I'm your host, Elaine McFadden, a registered dietitian with a master's in public health, and we're here because we know that there's important information that you need to know that could make a difference in your life and could even save your life. And we try to tell people, okay, well, we wish that everyone would like us. We realize we're probably annoying to a few, maybe more than a few. What we have to talk about a lot of the times, we wish that it was like fun and all about like the latest celebrity gossip and all that, but unfortunately it's on the realities of life, and these realities can impact whether we live or die. And so as much as we'd like to be your friend, we're really here to save your life. That is our main objective. And that we want to have a planet left for our children. A planet that is getting better, not going in the toilet, not where we're living in fear every day of a nuclear attack, of a nuclear accident, of a catastrophic weather event. This is what our life is now. This did not used to be the way it is. All of you young people out there, for those of us that have been around for a while, we know this was not how life used to be. And yes, the nuclear threat was real in the 60s. And as a matter of fact, I was thinking not that long ago about how we're not talking about it enough. We have thousands of aging nuclear warheads all around the world. And we're dependent on all these other countries to take care of them and keep them up. And we have nuclear waste all over the world. All of these things are an accident ready to happen. We need to get rid of those. Now, we have a show planned for you today, and it's going to be a good one. Yeah. Because we've got one of our very favorite guests of all time coming on the show, and that is Dr. Jonathan Lundgren. And those of you that have been longtime listeners of Smart Health Talk, you know that Dr. Lundgren was our guest. It was over a year ago. He had a job at the USDA. Yeah, he was actually one of our top scientists in the country, honored by the White House, one of our brightest stars, rising stars in Washington, D.C. And he did his job too well. And what happened was he actually uncovered the truth about pesticides and what they're doing to our butterflies, our bees, our other beneficial insects and predators. And in a way, this should be a signal to us on what is actually happening to us. They are a reflection of what is happening to us. So we need to pay attention to this. It's happening to us subtly every single day, and slow poisoning will kill you. Now, it looks like our guest is here, Dr. Lundgren. Woo! Okay. Dr. Lundgren, as I told you, he used to be a USDA scientist. He's now running Blue Dasher Farm in South Dakota and doing some pretty incredible things out there and teaching our farmers some new tricks that are actually could be some old tricks. And we're very anxious to get an update on what Dr. Lundgren has been up to, because we know that this man is not, he's heroic. He is not a coward. He is so brave. He's willing to stand up to the USDA and say the truth. He is there for us, everyone. He is looking out for us and fearless, and we just salute him as one of our ultimate heroes. Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Jonathan Lundgren. Can you hear me? I don't think you can hear us. Okay, everyone. Okay, can you hear us now, Dr. Lundgren?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. Well, we just were giving you the big introduction here. You'll have to
All
listen back
right.
to it. I think you might have missed it. I know. I was
Yep,
looking
I
at your
did.
face and I
Or,
was thinking, can he hear us? Can he hear us? And I promised that we would have no difficulties this time. Okay, well, you know that we are thrilled to have you on the show, that you're one of our absolute favorites. And I was just telling everyone how great you are and that you're one of our heroes and how brave and how you were willing to stand up for what is right and the truth because you realize this is affecting millions and billions of people all across the planet because we're all being exposed to these poisons. And I want to just give you a chance to get everyone to, first of all, get to know who you are and give a little bit of background, and then we'll get into Blue Dasher Farm and what's been happening over there. Because Dr. Lundgren hasn't been staying in South Dakota either, everyone. He's been like, he's making trips halfway around the world. He's spreading the word globally. We
Mhm.
love it.
Yeah, it's been a busy couple of years, that's for sure.
Yeah, so go ahead and, yeah, it has been, I guess, a couple of years, hasn't it? I was thinking about that as I was getting ready. I was trying to remember just how long it had been because it does feel like I've really missed you. So go
Yeah.
ahead and give us all a little something about yourself because you're a way more interesting person than I am, and I want everyone to get to hear your story.
Oh, all right. So I'm an agroecologist. I study our food system, and yeah, I worked for the USDA for around 11 years,
Oh, it was
and
11.
studying kind of things like risk assessment of pesticides and genetically modified crops. And then I also studied how to produce food in ways that don't need all of those inputs, all of those chemicals, agrochemicals. So,
So what was it
um,
like working at the USDA as a scientist? Did you like it?
well, it was great at first. It was a good way to get my feet on the ground and get my career up and running, and I did well. I was actually one of the top scientists with the agency, and got to meet President Obama in the White
Yeah,
House for
honored at
being
the
one of the.
White House as one of our
Yeah.
brightest stars.
Yeah.
That's how I look
Uh,
at it anyway.
it
So,
was cool. It was cool. It was a good
yeah.
day. Um, but then we started. I started listening to the farmers that were really innovating things out there, and they were kind of finding that they could do things ecologically on their farm that the science said couldn't happen. And then I also was starting to listen more to beekeepers, and they were saying pesticides are killing our bees, and the science wasn't supporting that either. And so we started to use some of our research programs to really they validated some of these observations that the farmers and the beekeepers were having, and it really called into question just how fragile our food production system really is, and we thought that there was a better way, but that necessitated a paradigm shift in how we produce food, and the USDA is, I think, more interested in maintaining the current paradigm, right?
Well, yeah, because and why well why is that? I mean, how is it set up that at the USDA that it works on pesticides? Like for example, I read an article how it was, I'm trying to remember if it's the EPA or the USDA, I think it might have been the USDA, had visited a farm to see how they were using pesticides on the farm.
Hmm.
And I thought, oh, so that's our tax money at work. They're they're going down and talking to the farmers, and of course, all of the representatives from the pesticide companies are in attendance as well. And so I was like, oh, okay, so I see how this works. I'm wondering how much time they're spending on organic farms and getting feedback from organic farmers versus the pesticide company and how we're using pesticides on these farms. So how do you feel that it supported the pesticide paradigm?
Well, I mean, our food production is big money right now, right? You look at corn and soybeans, and that's, geez, that's on 60% of 60% of all crop acres are just those two crops, you know. So
That high?
we've simplified things, haven't we?
Yeah, I remember
And
you saying something the last time, Dr. Lundgren, on how where we used to have a diversity of crops, even hundreds, we now have like five.
right, on the majority of land for sure. And that simplification has come through as a result of, you know, as our food system became more and more industrialized, right? It became simplified more and more. And large corporations ended up figuring out how to take advantage of that. And those that large corporate money is what currently drives a lot of the USDA's interest. It's not to say that they don't spend any time on things like organic or figuring out non-chemical means of managing pests, for example. But certainly, yeah, they're not going to bite the hand that feeds them, so to speak.
So how has your life changed over the past couple of years, ever since the incident at the USDA where you basically, you know, found the truth about these pesticides? Why don't you explain that on what it was that caused such an uproar at the USDA with what Dr. Jonathan Lundgren found out? It's just like he put everything in an uproar and just turned, you know, the possibility of the pesticide industry being turned upside down with this information because it was so significant.
Hmm. Yeah, so I don't know whether your listeners know about these or not, but there's a seed treatment. It's called neonicotinoids, and they're pretty pervasive right now. Have you talked about these before, Elaine?
Well, that they're a pesticide, and yeah, they have a synthetic nicotine in there that someone even told us that the bees can become addicted to, just like cigarettes, which is kind of
Hmm.
sick. Really sick that
Yeah,
you get them addicted to the very thing that's killing them. But
yeah.
yeah, and so these
Well,
are
these are
these are
very
something that
pervasive and they're very toxic, right?
well, they coat seeds with this, and I think that's something that people don't understand very much is that we're coating seeds with pesticides.
Right.
Why don't
I
you
mean,
explain
seeds
how
don't
that
come
works?
out red and blue, right? They're treated with various chemicals to hopefully help the farmer, but the 13% of the terrestrial land surface of our country right now, that's not crop acres, that's land surface, is treated with these neonicotinoids. And one corn seed has enough insecticide on it to kill 360,000 bees. So this is a major problem. This is one of the biggest problems of our generation, I think, right now. Um, and so we were started to ask questions about
Uh-huh.
whether or not these neonicotinoids were helping farmers and whether or not they were having non-target effects, especially on things like bees. And at the same time, we were also investigating a new group of insecticides that are genetic pesticides. So we can now have the power to flip on and off genes in our focal pest, and very powerful technology. It's called RNAi. And Monsanto just recently commercialized a variety of corn that has RNAi in it to kill the corn rootworm. So we started to ask questions about the safety of RNAi as well. And we were on a scientific advisory panel for the EPA. And they're not as specific as we thought they were. And just asking those questions suddenly started to, about neonicotinoids and RNAi-based technologies, the USDA started to suppress our science. And that's not okay. That's really not okay. We need to be able to have that dialogue. And so I blew the whistle and resigned. It became very clear that the future of our food system is already happening, but it's happening in spite of large infrastructure that's supporting our current food system. So I needed to get out of that.
So you don't
Fair
see
enough.
that corporate agriculture is our answer to our future food supply.
Well, I mean, maybe at some point, but not right now for sure. I don't believe that these simplified monocultures of, just single crops on thousands and thousands of acres is the answer. It's destroying the environment. It's diminishing human health. It's
Well, as a
hurting
dietitian, yeah,
it's
I look.
hurting farmers.
Yeah, it's hurting. How does this hurt farmers? Because when we saw President Trump signing the order to continue the allow of the, and please correct me, the chlorpyrifos pesticides that destroy a baby's brain before they're even born. It causes dense in it. It causes autism, emotional detachment, inability to learn, lowering their IQ, just so many different things. And we're doing this to our babies before they're even born. But what really got me was that Trump said that he signed that because they were helping farmers. And they help farmers where I live for their citrus disease with total disregard to the rest of the population's health and expose us to these pesticides in our homes and are spraying constantly fields located even across the street from schools. And I just wonder about this concept of helping farmers. And in your mind, how can we really be helping farmers?
Well, right now it seems like margins are just getting thinner and thinner for farmers, right? They're just not making money in a lot of cases. Last year, corn was grown at a $27 per acre loss in the U.S., but we've still planted like 95 million acres of it. So this is a crazy, crazy system.
Who picks up that loss? Who, is the farmer pick up
Well,
that
it's
loss or
the
the
government.
taxpayers?
Well, well, the farmers are losing money. I think they're starting to burn up notes at the banks and stuff like this. But I mean, that doesn't mean that's an average, right? So that means half of the people made more and half made less. But nevertheless, it's not a good number. And so we just finished a study where we were looking at farmers that were trying to diversify their cornfields, where they were planting things like cover crops and filling up any bare soil with other plants, flowering plants and things like this. They were integrating livestock back into their fields, and they didn't use any insecticides, right? But these guys have been at this for like 10 years, right? Or longer, possibly, often longer. So they were best management practices. And then we looked at their neighbors' cornfields up here. This was in North Dakota, South Dakota, Minnesota, and Nebraska. And my master's student, Claire Lacan, ran the work. And we looked at these guys were planting genetically modified corn. These neighbors were, and they were planting neonicotinoid seed treatments. And yep, it was business as usual. We found that the insecticide-treated cornfields had tenfold more pests than the untreated fields. The yields were a little bit lower in the regenerative, what we're calling regenerative farms, cornfields, but the profits were twice as high. So, I mean, it's a really good business decision to start thinking about, incorporating plant diversity onto your farms. And that's, yeah, this study
Yeah.
really demonstrated that well.
Well, and I remember you telling me that we would be better off just leaving the insects alone, just stepping back and letting them do your thing. I still remember you saying that because I thought it made so
Yeah.
much sense. And then I actually found a study that verified exactly what you said, and they had three plots. One they did nothing, one they did IPM, another one they did the pesticides, and what they did is they measured the amount of bad insects versus the amount of good insects that were present. Which one do
hmm
you think had the highest percentage of good insects by far than any other plot? Can you take a
Yeah,
wild guess? The one that they did
yeah,
nothing. Yes.
yeah,
And
that's right.
we're going about this all wrong, and that's what I love about what you're doing. Dr. Lundgren. And everyone that's just tuning in, this is KCAA Radio. We're here. This is Smart Health Talk. I'm your host, Elaine McFadden, and we're here with Dr. Jonathan Lundgren. He's a former USDA scientist that studied pesticides and discovered some very disturbing facts about them that actually impacts a lot of things and many, many different levels. And when we think about that, Dr. Lundgren, like how many levels of life are we really kind of like pooping over, just right? Like we're affecting in a very negative and long-term way.
Right. Well, I think
that we don't, absolutely. That most of us don't think of. Yeah, that we don't think of.
Right. Just because the side of the jug says it's an insecticide doesn't mean that it just kills insects, right? And or an herbicide just kills plants. No, that's not true. These are in a lot of ways, these are have many non-target effects, and oftentimes in ways that we can't possibly predict or know until years down the road. And I think we've lost that respect of our pesticides. I'm not an advocate for banning all agrochemicals and things like this. I think that we need to respect these things and understand that there's consequences to their use, and that's not portrayed in a lot of the marketing for these chemicals, and that is to our detriment. I think this is a huge issue that we're facing right now. Look at the bees, for crying out loud. Just look at the bees, or the monarchs, like you were telling me about in your emails.
Yeah, the monarchs, because they sprayed for the citrus disease last year, which I had all kinds of monarchs. I had caterpillars all over my milkweed, and then after they sprayed, it was just like silence. I didn't see, and that was early in the year, and didn't see anything else the entire year. It wasn't until a friend of mine actually donated caterpillars that we were able to start with 8, and I'm proud to announce I must have like 250 eggs going on right now. I've got little babies hatching everywhere. I've got
they grow up fast, don't they?
I've got like 40 pupae. I just released 2 today, and it's like it never gets tired. I never get tired of releasing a monarch. Just letting it out into the wild and watching it take its first flight with those beautiful wings that it develops. It's just brings me so much joy taking care of them, and that's why we started the Blue Monarch Project here, because we used to have millions of them here, which is different than the Midwest. A lot of people think of monarchs going to Mexico, but ours go to the ocean and then come back in the spring. But you, I was, pardon me?
Do they go to Monterey, California there?
Well, different places along the ocean. They have a big festival, I think, near Pismo Beach as well, that I really want to go to. But I feel like I've made a big contribution with my monarchs, and it's pretty rewarding. And I did mention to you in an email that I had a mutant. I'm gonna put some video of it. I had another one that was just like a body and legs, because the chrysalis got damaged. And I mentioned to you that it just amazed me that even as mutated as these butterflies were, they were still fighting for life. They were still alive and fighting. And I thought about what you're experiencing with this monarch devastation happening in your area, and I thought, if these monarchs fight this hard to live, there has to be something extremely dangerous happening in your area for the kind of results that you're getting with the monarchs. Why don't you tell everyone what's happening there and the research you're doing with them?
Well, we've been working on monarchs and other pollinators for a number of years now. We're seeing, as our food system simplifies and we go down a road of monocultures, and very, very little plant diversity out there, and overuse of herbicides, I think, could be argued as well. we see that milkweed, which monarchs require to complete development, we're losing milkweed, right? A lot of that habitat, what monarchs used to require, is gone. And the problem is that there's still milkweed out there, but what we showed is that milkweed was contaminated with some of the insecticides that we're putting into our cropland. So even the milkweed that you see out on the landscape may or may not be particularly useful for the monarchs and other butterflies and other bees. And then we just completed, I had a student here from France for the summer, and he just did a little pilot study where we showed that, just even a little bit, like almost imperceptible, half a part per billion of these neonicotinoid seed treatments in the nectar that these monarchs were drinking resulted in like 100% lethality. So
Oh my gosh, really? That's what you guys found at half of what they allow, at
it was really
50%.
surprising. I've never seen toxicity at that level before. So
Wow, that is so upsetting. And you were
we'll
speaking.
go out. I mean, so on Blue Dash Farm, where we have our research facility and our demonstration farm, we have 28 acres of native unbroken prairie and wetlands out there, and we have tons of milkweed. And I'll look and look and look, and I mean, if I find 1 or 2 caterpillars per year, I mean that's a good year.
Wow.
So even though we do not use a lot of pesticides, in fact, no insecticides at all, even on here, I mean, it's like these pesticides are just pervasive.
Well, tell
It's really
people about
disturbing.
drift because, like I mentioned, we have schools here with, I actually have information on just what pesticides were used when, and I look these up, and they're hormone disruptors, and I read the story about the man that actually developed hormone disruptors, and he was so terribly upset because it was not meant to be used as pesticides, and he saw the destruction. He knew what was going to happen with it, and he tried to fight it, but it was too big by then. But these are being sprayed right across the street from schools, and these children teens are going through puberty. It interrupts the puberty cycle. They can have trouble having kids later on. But we have all this going on, and I don't really see anything being done to reverse what's going on. And before I forget, I wanted to tell you, because you mentioned the milkweed, and I found a really interesting study. And this was like reading a lot of boring scientific stuff to even find this, but they found that milkweed was the least invasive weed of any weed out there. That it doesn't interfere with the growth of the plant. It doesn't steal nutrients or water or any of the things that you might think. So the weed is actually symbiotic and beneficial, that it's bringing pollinators, for one thing, with the flowers on it, but it's not stealing from the crop. So I want to ask, why are we not planting more milkweed? Because if it's they said something like 2% was all that it would like take from the soil or something like that. It was just, but they said basically it's the least invasive weed of any weed out there. And so I just think that basis alone says that we should be planting lots of milkweed, because if these farmers are afraid the milkweed's taking away from their crop, it's not. So I thought that was pretty significant.
But we can't just plant habitat, and that's what some are showing, is that, I mean, just planting more habitat without trying to reduce or the use of pesticides may actually, well, it's hard to know whether that's helping us or hurting us.
Well, yeah, you have
Because
to
if
do the other
it's
thing
a bunch of
too.
milkweed, and then when it all becomes contaminated with some of these other pesticides, then it could be a sink for monarch populations rather than a source.
Yes, and
So
don't we
these are
have to get,
concerns, right?
well, yeah, and that's why what I'm trying to work on here is working on areas, like contained areas, where if
Awesome.
we can get everyone in a certain geographical area to get on board, and say, okay, we're going to use these alternative techniques, and at least if we could start with geographical areas, so we only will allow the release of monarchs in areas where everyone is on board and have been
Mm.
through an education and have like signed a pledge, nothing legal, but just sign a pledge. I will not use pesticides.
Right.
I will call the committee to ask for help if I undergo any problems. And that's what I want to see. Is I want to see communities helping each other, because I've got a system that I use for ants, and ants are so bad in this area, I can't even tell you. It's just like a major agricultural citrus area too, and these orchards have just been full of ants for the longest time. Um, but it's not. And then I had my neighbor thought they saw a brown recluse spider, which aren't even in California, and thought calling an exterminator was the answer. And they had a guy in a hazmat suit 10 feet from my son's bedroom that was wide open. And so it
Mm.
went right in his throat. And the guy has a hazmat suit. And then I find out it's not the best thing to spray spiders with pesticides unless you're doing a direct hit. It's not really helping. You have to get rid of the
A lot of
nesting
times,
areas.
no, insecticides don't work against a lot of spiders. Yeah.
Yeah, so, but people don't know this, and then they're not thinking when I'm spraying for the pesticide, I'm actually affecting my neighbor because it's
Right.
drifting over there, and no one is communicating. They're not warning me or anything. But we need to work as communities to solve these problems. The ant
Right.
problem on my street is not just my problem. Those
Hmm.
ants go up and down the entire curb, man. It's like it's
Yeah.
all of our problems. So we need to work to come back together as communities and solve these problems. And so you're kind of doing that with these farmers that you're bringing to your farm. You guys are learning together, you're problem solving, you're sharing stories, because we have a lot of knowledge that was passed down through generations of farmers that some of these farmers might remember, and maybe they kind of got away from it because Monsanto has schools where they teach people to do the Monsanto way,
Mm.
and not the Dr. Lundgren way. So
Mm.
you're trying to have a
Right. So
school to teach the Dr. Lundgren way.
right. So after I blew the whistle, I quit the USDA, but I didn't just sit idle. We started a what we're hoping will become a national network of centers for excellence in what we're calling regenerative farming. And what
Yes,
regenerative
love
farming,
it.
yeah, what regenerative farming does is it really captures the spirit of organic and permaculture and these different approaches to food production, um, but focusing strongly on soil health, biodiversity conservation, to produce nutritious food profitably for the farm. So everybody wins in this situation, right? The beekeepers, the ranchers, the farmers, the consumers. There's just a few people that don't win, and hopefully they can figure out how to work within this system, right?
Well, I remember you
Uh,
saying that like organic really isn't enough. We have to have regenerative farming. We have to regenerate because we've already degraded, we've degenerated our
right.
soil to a point where it's lifeless.
Yep.
And we have to put the life back in there. And could you explain to people what the kind of the logistics of soil a little bit on how much life is really there and what kind of role soil plays in carbon sequestration um, which, we have like too much carbon in the air right now. We're at 410 parts per million. We're supposed to be at 350. We were at 185 for many years before the Industrial Revolution. And one of the things that we have changed is using Roundup and killing this microcozy fungi. From what I understand, that's like the only soil microorganism I know of. Okay, that's my big soil education. But I know that's a really important fungi. I know that. So why don't you explain how this works?
Yeah, right. So the soil is teeming with life, and we're only just looking at the tip of the iceberg right now as far as our understanding of how things interact within the soil. But everything that you see above ground, everything that you're eating for your food, be it meat or produce or whatever, it's all tied back to the soil. And so the soil is just absolutely critical for as we improve our food production system. So we believe that at Blue Dasher Farm and Ecdysis Foundation that we can solve planetary scale problems using our food production system. And so the farmers that we work with have been doing some amazing things. Some of our projections are that if we devote only a portion of the rangelands to a more holistic management of cattle herds, that we can actually offset the where you move the cattle frequently, mimicking some of the patterns of the bison and how they used to feed these large ruminant herds that used to be on the prairie. Where you flash graze it, right? You graze it real hard, but then you allow that plant community to rest and resurge. And as the plant community is doing that, that is how the carbon is sequestered down into the soil. And so by getting that plant diversity into our cropland through cover crops, we can also use that as a way to offset carbon emissions. But we can offset the nation's annual carbon emissions just by changing the way that we manage our crops and livestock while producing healthier food, right? I mean, this is
a win-win.
Just makes a lot of sense.
It's a definite win-win, and I love that concept because that's what I want more than anything, is for people to actually have nutrition back into their food again so they can stay healthy. And like Dr. Seneff said, they have us thinking now that we have to be senile with Alzheimer's and full of pain and unable to walk as we're older, when actually we could be very healthy as we get older. I mean, even back in the 1700s, I mean, Thomas Jefferson and John Adams, they lived to be like in their 90s, didn't they? It was incredible. And they didn't even have all the health care we have. So they got it from
You are
food.
what you eat, aren't you? Yeah.
And that, I don't know, just this concept of reversing the carbon in our air, because the reason I asked this, Dr. Lundgren, I just read a story about how they wanted to take all of this rock, because our oceans have acidified so much because they're absorbing all the CO2 from the air for us, trying to balance it out. And the acid in the ocean rising is very dangerous. And so to combat this, they want to take all this rock, limestone, and put it into the ocean along the shores, and that this is going to take like hundreds of years to reverse what we're doing. And and then I heard about they want to build some sort of a giant plant that's going to pull carbon from the air and make money off of it, and these things cost like millions and millions of dollars to do. And tell us what we should be doing, what we should be thinking as far as like dealing with this situation that we're in right now, because we have to take action. And what is the best way to do it, to reverse what's happening right now with our weather?
Well, the farmers that are changing things are stopping tillage, so they're preserving the biology that's in their soil. So don't till the soil, right? That's step one in the process.
Okay.
They always have living root in the soil, so there's always plant life on the ground. There's no fallow period. There's no period of bare soil.
Okay, so always like a cover crop.
Mm-hmm. Right, or interseeding.
Don't leave the soil bare without any protection, is what you're saying.
Yep. And then they're using some plant diversity is better than none, and more is better than less. And so they're figuring out ways of getting a lot of different species out there into their farms, either through cash crops or through pasture or through interseeding conservation strips, things like this. And then these guys are integrating livestock back in with their crops, and that's a really critical aspect of
what does that mean? What does that mean? I'm trying to picture it.
Well, you graze areas of the cropland, maybe when the cash crop isn't growing. Or in my case, on Blue Dasher, we use our sheep for weed control to try to eliminate or vastly reduce our herbicide use. So we actually have sheep that are grazing on our weeds in our cash crop.
Yeah, I had someone about that on the show before, and they said that because they do, and the goats as well, they do such a great job at eating the weeds that if you time it correctly so that they're eating them before the seeds develop, and you continue with that system over a period of years, that eventually there won't even be hardly any weeds anymore because the seed population will have gone down.
Yep. And then you're also growing a healthier crop plant that can outcompete those weeds because your soil is healthy again. You've got biology down there, you've got nutrients cycling through, and all of these things. So it makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense. And then you don't have to spend all the money on the chemical fertilizers and all the pesticides because so
that adds to your profit margin and the health of the farmer and their family.
It's just a good business decision.
Well, and have you found that a lot of farmers are getting scared? Have they had bouts of serious illness or known other farmers that have, and they're starting to get worried about their own health?
I think that when I see somebody, watching, and as some of these farmers will learn about, the effects of some of these pesticides on human health, it harkens back to maybe members of their own family or people in their neighborhood that they care a lot about, and how they've got some of these diseases or syndromes or what have you that are linked more and more frequently now to some of the pesticides that we're putting into the environment, and it's upsetting. It's upsetting.
Yeah,
but
because
people have to be able to be willing to learn, these things, and yeah, a lot of folks still bury their head in the sand. Like there is no consequences to their use, and I think that's painful.
Yeah, it's painful because you don't want to see people suffer, and you want to protect them. And that's what we have a better
way, there's a better way out there.
Yes, I know. That's when I first learned about organic, which was, it was like 40 years ago almost, 35 at least, and started learning about these pesticides, it could not seem logical to me to put poison on your food and just think that poison is going to just somehow disappear.
Right. Right. It doesn't.
Into thin air, and they're actually accumulating in our bodies and probably in the soil and water as well. Mm-hmm. Are farmers seeing these kind of consequences on their fields as well?
I think they are. I mean, we're trying to study. We're trying to help the farmers innovate, though. So we tend to work on the farms that don't use a lot of pesticides on them anymore, and so we want to keep we're trying to use our science to keep those guys, the most innovative farmers and beekeepers out there, keep them innovating, keep them moving forward, because I think that's really critical for our.
And not looking back.
There really just isn't a lot of other research infrastructure to help these people. most of the science is focused right now on supporting the current system,
And
and
well, the
rather than
insurance, the way
reinventing it.
yeah, before I forget, because I know this is a big deal, the way the insurance was set up for farmers, that was a big
Hmm.
problem too, because some of the systems that you mentioned with the cover crops and that they were trying to incorporate was actually in conflict with their insurance, where by doing
Right.
these good things, they they were at risk. So how did
Right.
I don't quite understand what was happening there.
Well, there's, farmers are only insured if they're using best management practices, and the best management practices are created by the current infrastructure. If you have what looks like, a weedy field when in reality it's cover crops in there, then the insurance company says, well, you lost your crop. Yes, we know all your neighbors lost the same crop to the same drought, but in your case, you don't get a payout, but everybody else does. To me, we need to do away with farm insurance altogether. I mean, I can understand in a hail event or something along these lines, but right now it's stifling the innovation of our food system. There's no consequences to doing things the same old way, when the same old way may actually be hurting farmers more than helping them.
So what's some of the best things that have come out of your work so far?
Oh, geez. We've had 10,000 face-to-face contacts over the last 18 months all over the world with farmers and beekeepers that are making changes. Um, Great science is coming out, but it's just been the swell of support too. I mean, what
You
we're
got like
doing is
$160,000 to support Blue Dasher.
yeah, we're crowdfunded. I mean, that's never
Yeah,
been done
people
before.
said we support you. Yeah,
Yeah,
that was
yeah,
great.
that's really humbling, that's for sure. And when Jenna, my wife, and I started on this thing, and then the lab team too,
Yes,
I
your wife
mean,
is a big part of this.
we had no idea what this was going to look like. And so to the idea that we're still in the black and we're still helping people and we're doing things differently, um, yeah,
You went to Asia
we're
and
going to
worked.
keep fighting.
What was it like in Asia when you met with the farmers there? Do you find that farmers are farmers no matter if they're in Asia or here?
There was a lot of similarities. There's a lot more subsistence farming, or small plot kind of farms there, but they're trying to expand that out now as their aging farming demographic starts to retire and move
Hmm.
on. They're figuring out, well, how do we feed billions of people?
Well, what you
So
learned about soybeans over there, I thought
yeah,
was fascinating. Explain
yeah.
to everyone how they approach that.
Right. Well, in the U.S., soybeans are grown on, 1,000-acre monocultures. But over there, where they've been growing, where soybeans originated in China, they grow it as an understory crop oftentimes. And so it was interesting to see that. Of course, they've been tilling and abusing their soil for 5,000 years. So they have to do something in order to keep that soil productive. And they don't use a lot of chemical fertilizers, at least on the scales that we were looking at. So I wonder whether those mycorrhizal associations with the tree roots are maybe helping to feed some of those bean plants. They were beautiful bean plants. I couldn't believe how big they were.
Yeah, and just the concept, because I know that there's got to be a lot of things like that out there to learn. And to
Right, right.
me, I would rather for us to be putting our money into learning that, oh, you can grow soybeans next to trees and they're actually healthier and you need less inputs than,
Right.
oh, we can use like this synthetic chemical type of thing. And there has to be lots more knowledge like that out there to learn and to share. And I feel like, you've got things started, you got the ball rolling. You got people's attention.
Yep.
Yeah, and you're doing it. You're doing it, Dr.
Yep. We're
Lundgren.
still around. We're still around.
Hey, so are we. Can you believe it?
Yeah.
We're still here
So,
too. That's amazing because it got close a couple of times. Weren't sure if we were going to still be on the air, but we're still here because People's health and saving lives is what we're all about, and I know that's what you're about. And like I told you, you're right up there on our hero list, and we applaud your bravery and everything that you're doing. We know it takes a lot out of you, and I asked you like how you've changed in the last couple of years. I could tell you're a little bit more serious. I think it's hard when you have to get a big dose of the world all in one spoonful. And
we're a lot more focused, that's for sure. We know what our mission is, and that's
but that feels good though, doesn't it?
Absolutely, it does. Yeah.
And so, what would you say is your? We only have a minute left. What if you wanted to go tell anyone anything else about Blue Dasher Farms? Go ahead and give.
Well, we're here to help, and the only reason that we're here is because people supported us. So if people like what they're hearing about the kinds of stuff that we're doing, then please consider supporting us, and we'd appreciate that.
Yes, this is the kind of research that can change the world. Everyone.
Right. Nope. We're not getting corporate funding to do this science. Let's put it that way.
Okay. Yeah, we need people, and this is for us. This is for us. This is research outside of corporate interests, outside of corporate control. This is the kind of research we need, because this is where we really get at the truth. And regeneration is the future, everyone. We have to regenerate our bodies. We have to regenerate our soil, and leave a planet for our children that is better than we've left, at least where we're at right now. I mean, wouldn't that be great if we could just achieve that in the next 20 years? All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Lundgren, and everyone that stayed with us this entire hour. We thank you so much for doing that, and we'll be back here next Tuesday, 4 o'clock. And please check out our Blue Monarch project and all our social media. Find us and go look for Blue Dasher Farm and follow them too. All right. Thanks a lot, Elaine McFadden.